Hey everybody, and welcome to Town Square Central. Today we are going to be talking about one of the big changes that's going to be coming to Gemstone soon, which is the Ranger Spell Review. And with us today we have GM Mestys, who is leading that effort. We have Rouste, the Platinum Ranger and other profession extraordinaire. And we have Nuadjha.
Nuada. The
Nuadjha,
JH is silent. Nuada.
who's the rangeriest ranger I know. But yeah, we're going to be talking today about this Ranger Spell Review and what the implications are going to be for the Ranger profession in Gemstone, and going through some of those changes. So to everybody, welcome to Town Square Central.
Hello.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Or welcome back, I should say to you, Roust.
Honored to be a two-time participant.
Yeah, right? That's a small group of people.
It's like the Five Host Club at Saturday Night Live.
That's right. Yeah, it's basically the same stature, I think. So let's start by doing a quick intro for each of you. So just tell us a little bit about, I guess just tell us as much as you feel comfortable about who you are, and then tell us about the main character you play and why you like to play a ranger, and why you're here today. And Mestys, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. Would you like me to go into my playing or my GM history first?
Maybe let's start playing and then do GMing.
All right. So I started back in the AOL days in the black and white. Back when it wasn't unlimited AOL, so the typical story there, origin story of spending too much time on
angry
AOL.
Parents. Yeah.
Angry parents to the phone bills, sure.
Yeah.
I was there when we moved to the web. I was still not a GM at the Gemstone 4 conversion time. I was a host, so I did help out a little bit with some walking through of the system initially. But when I started, I pretty sure I did the old giant man warrior thing, like everybody does. But soon became more enamored with the Ranger Lee lifestyle. So yeah, I started playing my Ranger pretty early on. And I didn't cap until a few good number of years later, probably not until like early 2000s at some point. And then I became a GM as I was graduating college. I remember it because it was finals week. I remember getting that letter, and then I picked up a lot of different responsibilities. Started mostly with Ranger things. Helped out with the creation of Nature's Fury and Assume Aspect, and the original Ranger Spell Review back in 2004, which introduced lores and stuff like that. And I helped out with the creation of Paladins. That was kind of like the big thing that was going on when I was starting my GM career. And just throughout the years, I've had many hats. I've picked up many roles. I've learned a lot about the back end of things and try to help out wherever I can.
So every 16 years, there's a new Ranger Spell Review. So we'll have you back in 2036 when it's time to revamp them again for Gemstone 6.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. How about Nuadjha?
Not quite as early as Mestys there, but I started a Ranger in 1996. Some friends of mine got me into it, and my sort of funny "why did I think Gemstone was cool" story is that my friends were telling me about these floating discs following you around to carry your junk, and I just thought that was the coolest thing I heard of, so I had to try the game. I played that first Ranger for about 4 years, never got him past level 23. I spent most of my time on the amulet, buying and selling things, trying to make a few bucks. Well, silvers anyway. And then I stopped for a couple of years, and I came back in 03, and I made Nuadjha. And I've been playing Nuadjha since then. Now, the Ranger class has always been really the only class I've been distinctly interested in Gemstone. I've tried almost all the other ones. I've never really tried a monk. I've tried UAC, but I've tried all the other classes. And I like wizards second best, but there's something about the Ranger class that always keeps me interested, and it's that blend of the different mechanics of the spells and the skills and the ability, especially after cap, to maximize your multiple weapon skills and multiple abilities that really keeps it interesting, I think. And also, especially earlier levels, some of the choices you have to make to balance things out depending on what build you want. I think I spent 30 levels having 10 MIU ranks and nothing else because I was trying to cram as many MTPs to other things as I could. And then what was it? I thought I was leaving the game in 2010, so I wrote up an archery guide, sort of fairly well, and then actually I got drawn back in by Shattered. Took a lead role in that. I don't know if you guys know about it, but this huge sort of Shattered war in the summer after it opened, and then got drawn back into FIME and have been playing FIME since then. Nuadjha is at about 3.5x cap, I suppose.
Oh, is that all?
Something like 26, 27 million experience working on Ascension now.
Yeah.
Although I honestly don't play that much. I mostly just hit up Rhyme with the Hand of the Arcadi and pop in every so often to, go kill things in OTF. But yeah, the Ranger class keeps me interested, keeps me coming back, and I am really excited about these upcoming Ranger changes. As Mestys was mentioning, the last major Ranger changes were in, I think, was it Hot Summer Nights in 04? Is that right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so I was saying 16 years, yeah. I remember when those came out; those were fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to the new potential for this Druid path here. It's something that people have for years tried to sort of shoehorn in to the current Ranger build, and it's never really quite worked all that well. There have been a couple of technical lacks that have made it difficult to pursue the Ranger Druid path, and with these new changes, including especially Wild Entropy, it's actually very possible to pursue this Druid path and do it at lower levels, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, you'll just have to re-roll Nuadjha to get the full experience, right? Start from the ground up. And then by the time the next Ranger review comes around, you'll be 3.5x cap again. You'll be ready.
You never know.
Yeah. All right, Rouste, tell us your Rangerly connections.
Yeah, so I started in the mid-90s, and I always liked kind of playing the sneaky kind of guy, but archery didn't actually exist yet in Gemstone, so I played a rogue named Joskin. Incidentally, that name's been with me the whole time I've been at Gemstone.
Oh, yeah.
And I was really terrible at Gemstone 3. I never got past level 15. And then when I decided to try Platinum, I actually had never played a Ranger before, so I was like, well, whole new instance, I'll try something I haven't tried before, and it's just been so much fun. I feel like Rangers, more so than any other class, can do everything and anything. There's nothing that you can put in front of a Ranger that they can't do natively, basically. So just that versatility is really fun. Shooting things in the eye from the shadows is really fun.
I feel like a lot of the iconic fantasy heroes tend to be Rangers, Like Aragorn, right? And what's his name that everybody had a version of in the early gem, Drizzt. Yeah,
I mean, you could count Legolas as a Ranger too.
Legolas, yeah, exactly. I feel like there is something about, I think maybe it's just that fantasy authors are drawn to that, but there is this kind of mystique of the stealthy, bow wielding, in tune with nature dude. I'm a guy, so I guess that's my bias, but that seems to be really compelling to me.
I agree. It's that idea of the sort of the loner character who's good at everything, who sort of sits in the fringes of society and occasionally interacts. I think it appeals to a lot of introverts and is a central fantasy character. I also think of Tanis from Dragonlance.
Oh, yeah. Tanis Half-Elf.
Tanis Half-Elven. Yeah.
So this is completely unrelated to anything, but I remember the last time I went into a Blockbuster was in Baltimore in 2008, maybe, and I saw that they had a Dragonlance movie, I think, animated
Seriously?
movie. Yeah. And I saw it, and I was dating this girl who's I'm now married to and I have 2 kids with. And this is probably not a great move on my part, but I was like, oh my God, we have to get this. I read these books, we've got to get this. And she was like, okay. And so we got it. It is the worst shit that I've ever seen in my entire life. I could only make it like 10 minutes through, but that brief moment in that blockbuster when I laid eyes on that title, my 12-year-old heart skipped like 50 beats. It was great. So there's that story.
Yeah, no, that's very nice.
Let's talk about sort of where Rangers are right now in Gemstone before any of these changes. And they are, Rouste, as you said, very flexible. Like you can make a sort of spike thorn build work. Like, right, you can do the sort of like weed mage, as people like to call them. I think most people think of Rangers as being archers, but you can also do UAC and sword and... So they're pretty flexible classes they are right now, right?
Yep.
So, Mestys, tell us, what was the sort of occasion for feeling like Rangers were ready for a spell review?
So it had been a little while since I'd been in active development. I took a break for a little bit, but one of the focuses that we wanted to deal with was Ascension. Like we knew that was coming on the horizon, so I wanted to do what I could to contribute on that front. But the deeper I got into it, I was like, I think we need to do something about these spells. And this was kind of coming on the heels of the Ranger survey that the town crier had put on. And so I started looking over those results as well, started factoring in some ideas. And I had some ideas for Ascension, but I was like, I knew that the base spells needed to be updated first. So I started getting to work on those and, kind of simplifying things, combining things where it's appropriate, kind of inserting new synergies between abilities, and just working on something that'd be a little more dynamic in combat. So that's kind of where the impetus was, and kind of where everything started. I wanted to say that the whole theme of nature-based damage, that is kind of thing that we introduced a while ago with Resist Nature. I kind of expanded on that, starting specifically with Wild Entropy, and then kind of everything grew out of that.
If you were to sort of summarize how things are changing from where they are now to where they're going, like what would you say are the big differences here?
I would say the interactions between spells, as well as the interactions between physical combat and magical combat, just allowing those interactions to kind of dictate the flow of combat, and allowing you to kind of create opportunities for yourself to gain extra benefits from going with those synergies.
Okay. And so let's just dive into this updated spell list. And I'm looking at the Ranger Spell Review 2020 doc that I think everybody has access to. Yeah. Some of these spells are the same, and literally the same as far as I can tell. Like, same spell number, same basic effect. Like, we have colors at 601, we have resist elements at 02, and then the first new spell is at 603, which is Wild Entropy. And this is a CS-based attack spell. So talk about this.
Yeah, so we wanted to be able to support more of a casting build early on, and that would only be possible with an attack spell, obviously. So we wanted to introduce something that would enable that sort of path. And Wild Entropy, it's a low-level, kind of low damage overall spell, but it can add up. It definitely synergizes with itself because of the debuff that it puts on targets, but we also didn't want it to kind of drop off and see continued use through the player's levels. So it's also useful for synergizing with any other attack spell that the Rangers have. And as they go through their leveling process, the use of Wild Entropy is expected to kind of augment some of the heavier hitters, like with Sunburst or, of course, Spikethorn.
So this is a sort of, it can be used as sort of like the Ranger version of 702, but it can also be used like in later levels as a setup spell for some big finishing punch.
That's right.
Yeah, if I can chime in here. So I've been doing some testing with this spell along with the other ones, and Mestys has done, I'm not sure who else helped, but the team did a fantastic job with this spell. Not only does it fill that really necessary gap as a low-level CS attack spell for a druid build, but it's got a couple of really neat things that make it amazing for higher level rangers as well. Like, spells like, Bloodburst or whatever, they really fade out after even you pass level 15, level 20, you're not using Bloodburst very much anymore as a sorcerer, right? Or 901 as a wizard. But this spell has two awesome things. So Mestys mentioned the debuff, but he didn't go into details about it. But one of the things that it does is it makes the target weaker to later attacks. And so, for instance, if you cast this spell and then you cast Spikethorn can do up to 3 cycles of damage, 4 if you have enough summoning lore and you get a good roll. And on every single roll, you do additional damage because of the debuff in Wild Entropy. And for 3 mana to make your Spikethorn hit harder, that's fantastic. But not only that, when you cast this spell multiple times, so you get a dot effect, a damage over time effect with this spell, and when you cast it multiple times, you can get up to 4 rounds. I think it's 4 rounds of DOT with it. And when you cast it a second time, all of the previous rounds that haven't fired off yet immediately fire. And so if you're casting this spell 3, 4, or 5 times, yes, it's a low-level spell, and yes, it does low-level damage on its initial hit, but suddenly you're stacking 40, 50, 60, 70 damage on the second, third, fourth hits, and that makes it extremely effective for a pretty low mana cost at high levels.
So that's an interesting, and I'd never really thought about spells like Bloodburst or 901 or whatever just kind of falling off. You're right, you sort of outgrow them when you get better options. Trying to make this thing feel relevant at every level is an interesting design idea. Mm-hmm. So foraging and skinning are now combined, right?
Yeah, that was one of the redundancies that definitely has been brought up a bunch over the years, and we decided to address. And I just came up with a name that would kind of suit both of them. Why not?
Nature's Bounty.
Nature's Bounty.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. I'm sure people are happy about that.
And you made it a standing effect. You don't have to cast it before you can.
Finally.
Yeah. Fantastic. Standard duration was another kind of limiting aspect of skinning that we wanted to get rid of.
And then there's also this, which I didn't even notice in my first read here, but in a certain amount of lore, the ranger can evoke the spell once an hour to fully restore all the forage spots in the room.
Yeah, that's already rangers are kind of the masters of foraging, and this is kind of an additional sort of perk that we wanted to introduce to the spell.
Yeah,
there is an item. It's a jug of water that lets you restore the slots like this, but there's only one that I know of, maybe a couple of older ones that exist, and this is an amazing new ability. There are a couple of situations in the game. OTF, for instance, has 3 rooms where you can forage herbs, and they're often foraged out for things like flowers and such, and there's one room where you can only forage 1 herb, and sometimes you're asked to get more than 5, of course. And so situationally, that is incredibly useful to be able to evoke the spell to restore all the slots.
Yeah, that is cool. Now, Rangers also gain some defensive spells, right? Like Bark Skin is now 605, so which this is the same spell that like the Treekin Druids have, right? In the Red Forest.
That's where we drew it from. It's something that kind of existed already as a creature ability, but we wanted to kind of tweak it, make it more player friendly as far as casting it goes, and it's added some nice lore benefits, so it actually can stick around a little bit better than the creature version. But yes, it's all about damage mitigation from spells and from maneuvers and from attacks, but it does kind of require a bit of foresight. Like you have to know that you're about to take a hit in order for it to be most effective. And obviously
because it doesn't last very long.
Yeah, it's pretty short duration. In order to kind of mitigate that, we also included the ability to be able to cast it when you've already been hit. Like you've already been incapacitated somehow, and you just want to be able to keep yourself alive. That's kind of the reason why we added the commune aspect of it, which allows you to cast it when you're incapacitated.
So one of the problems with the Rangers has always been that a Ranger, when stunned, has very few options to get out of the stun. If you have a Ranger companion, if you're over level 30, and if the companion's attack hits, because they will attack automatically when you're stunned, that can sometimes save your butt. But up to this point, the only way for a Ranger to get out of a stun or to try to save his or her butt has been to join Guardians of Sunfist and to get the ability to use Sigil of Escape, which is a dicey escape method.
Yep.
This spell provides something that most other classes have. So a bard can rally, a paladin can
Beseech.
That's it. Thank you. Beseech.
I learned that on my own podcast, everybody.
Did you really? There you go.
Yeah.
A wizard can time stop, but a ranger is kind of screwed, or has been screwed, if they're stunned. Now, this doesn't actually even come close to the ability to beseech and remove an effect, and so forth. But it provides an option that has been sorely lacking.
Yeah.
Its ability to commune and to at least survive the next hit. So that's amazing.
Yeah, it's like the "oh poop" button for rangers. Like
Yes.
Throw the shields up and hope for the best, which is better than not having a shield.
True.
And I see too that Whispering Willow is officially gone from the spell list, which is great because I don't know if anyone's ever cast that spell in all the years.
I will
come on
defend
now.
Whispering Willow right now.
Yeah.
It is one of my absolute favorite spells from a role-playing perspective.
Right,
It was
exactly.
awesome. I could talk to basically anybody, anywhere. They couldn't ignore, and I knew they were going to get it. They couldn't not get the message, and it was just, yeah, I loved using it.
I can see its roleplay value. My min-maxer heart though just looks at this spell and thinks like, well, that's what Elnet is for. Like I don't need Whispering Willow.
Yes, particularly with the updates to the ESP system, the whole idea behind Whispering Willow kind of became outdated. So we decided to just make it inherent to the Rangers' profession as a whole. And we also removed many of the restrictions that were in place beforehand. And I know that there's a lot of people who are big fans of the spell. Like they trained lore specifically for that spell. So I didn't want to just get rid of it entirely.
Yeah, I still think it's better than ESP because somebody could have their thought window and it's not up and they don't even see it, but the whisper is going to come through because it's like normal speech.
It's true.
And this is an upgrade too, because previously, you noted the lore, but even if you had the lore, you could never reach an unpresenced person.
It's true.
Such, and now you can actually do that as well.
Now you can bother anyone you want, whenever you want.
Yep, and they can respond. And this actually adds, Rangers over the last year or so also got this ability to track as an inherent ability. And so this now gives Rangers, at least a couple inherent abilities. The ability to track and the ability to whisper, sort of like a wizard can detect a node or a paladin can detect a holy shrine or so forth. These are two nice things that Rangers can do now.
And then moving up the spell list, it looks like Sounds got a little bit better, but is basically the same. Still a little distraction spell.
Yeah.
Did you want to say? You sound like you want to say more. Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the other themes that we kind of incorporated to these changes was moving things from like the kind of archaic sort of roles for attacks that certain abilities had. We're talking about Breeze, Tangleweed, and Spikethorn. They just kind of they dealt internally with their attack rolls, and it wasn't really standardized. But since we've got this shiny new standard maneuver roll system these days, we wanted to incorporate that for those abilities as well. So the incorporation of Sounds, the way that it fits into all of this is that it will now modify the SMR defense of its targets. So it'll make all those abilities hit harder and more often. So we wanted to kind of have it stay in the sun as well.
Yeah, I'm starting to see what you meant about trying to make these abilities play well together so that you're not just like doing one thing. So it's like, yeah, now casting this spell makes casting this spell more advantageous.
Right.
Yeah. And actually to chime in there, and as we go through this list, we're going to see even more of that. But I have to say that when you play a ranger who's making full use of these spells, especially if you're doing what they're designed to do and you're switching back and forth between magic and melee, honestly, the number of effects and the interactions between the effects here create this almost overwhelming tapestry where you don't actually quite know, especially unless you're really used to what's going on, what's causing what. It's sort of everything sort of comes together into this crescendo of effect. And the more you attack and the more you do and the more you keep using these spells, the more you accelerate that, the broader you weave that tapestry. And it's, I think for most players, especially casual players, it's going to be a fairly confusing thing for a while. But the great thing is you don't have to think about it. Stuff just happens with a lot of them, especially with like 625 and such. And there are things like 607 and 605 now that you can, so that's sounds and barkskin that you can cast and have a certain effect. But there's this sort of this synergy between the spells and the attacks that people make that I think is extraordinarily rangery. And it's just a really nice result of this spell change. So huge kudos to Mestys and the design team here.
Thank you. I'm glad that kind of came through. That was one of our goals there.
So from sounds then to so camouflage, which camouflage hides you and then makes your next attack more powerful, but it also can apply to your companion if you have one, and then if you have Shadow Mastery, you essentially camouflage almost instantaneously if you cast it, right?
Yeah, so Camouflage is definitely more of the stealth build. Ranger caters to them, but it's also quite useful for setting up your attack spells, since we did allow it to affect Bolt AS and your Ranger casting strength as well. And also, like you mentioned, with the companion interaction, it allows them to hit a little harder too. And since companions also do nature damage, everything is kind of working together to like it can be amplified by wild entropy.
Yeah, so I mean, this spell traditionally auto hides you and gives you plus 30 AS to a melee attack or to a ranged attack for one hit, or if you stay hidden for ranged, it will continue to happen. Actually, Mestys, does that continue to happen here? Can you get this on multiple attacks now if you stay hidden still?
Yeah. If you're sniping with ranged, you can keep up the AS boost. Yes.
That's great. So that's fantastic. So we still have that, so that's great. But so this is interesting. So I'm really curious to see how many Rangers are going to try out spell aiming with the skill changes that went into effect last week. I think it was last Monday. The thing about spell aiming for a Ranger, though, is that since we don't really have any native spell like Wizards do, or even Bards do, 425 or was it 512 or whatever to boost our spell AS, Rangers have crap spell AS. I tried it out 2x a cap, and with my Sunfist Siggles up and such, I was hitting about 360, 370, which is not enough to do anything as a cap with a spell. But if you are willing to do some setup, if you're willing to use sounds to drop their DS, and if you're willing to use camouflage here and actually Tangleweed, as I'll talk about in a second, it is possible to make a bolt spell work. It's not easy, and it's not necessarily the most effective use of your training points, but it's possible. And I'm curious to see how many Rangers try to pursue a bolt spell path. I think the CS path is much easier, but it's interesting to see that there is an option here for a bolt spell booster.
Right, and we'll get to that when we talk about Moonbeam. But it is something that we are supporting and something that we want to kind of encourage, but it is still in the still in development. Like it's not quite there yet. I think.
I agree.
I think we'll get to that point, but it's not quite a primary path yet.
Well, and speaking of Moonbeam, I think that Sunburst is designed to sort of work with that spell, right? From if I'm reading these correctly, or there's a nice little synergy. Let's talk about how these spells can interact and what they do.
Sure. So we wanted another attack spell, and we decided that Sunburst would be a decent place for it. It already had a CS-based component previously, but what we did is expand upon that and make it more damaging. So it's kind of a moderate damage spell, and also kind of debuffs the targets. It makes it a lot easier to hide in front of them if you're going with that stealth route. but it also has those synergies with Moonbeam, like you mentioned. So if something that has been moonbeamed, like it's been immobilized by Moonbeam, is hit by that sunburst, it'll do a significant amount of damage to them, and also leave that has that whole interaction with wild entropy as a nature-based attack. So again, those damage amps do add up. Where it does shine is in the Bolt spell version of Moonbeam. So that's our new attack spell that is a Bolt spell. The damage over time effect, or the maneuver over time effect of Moonbeam allows that immobilization to occur multiple times. So the idea is to hit them with that Moonbeam, get them immobilized, and while they're in the middle of those immobilization cycles, keep hitting them with Sunburst to get that extra damage in.
And I just like thematically the sun moon complementary thing. I think is also just nice, pleasing.
Yeah, yeah. I think that was a matter of brainstorming from Estild and Oscuro. I think probably from their WoW days. Wasn't really much.
We're going to see a lot of Rangers casting 611 in the middle of town because that's where mess colors used to be.
That's true.
Yeah.
That may be the case. Yeah.
That's inevitable, right?
They're already accidentally killing everybody with Nature's Fury. You might as well add a Moonbeam.
I'm actually really well, now someone has to do it just for meme purposes, but yeah, that's awesome. And then between those two, we have Tangleweed, which is essentially doing the same thing it was before, but also now plays well with others.
That's right. So it's a new maneuver-based attack now. It still knocks things down, does damage, and drains their strength, which is attack strength. But now, if you have the lore for it, it gives that strength to you. So it allows the ranger to kind of have a boost to their attack. That's all attacks, including your bolt spell attack as well. And then it'll buff your physical attack, your magical attack, and your casting strength.
Which is fantastic. Again, I mean, in terms of how the ranger class was designed, one of the sort of results of the current design, not the new one, but the current design for the ranger class, is that rangers don't have a very good AS. You have to work really, really hard as a ranger to get a decent AS, and sometimes it takes toys or extra spells or so forth. Tangleweed, because it has this flat 2-minute AS boost, depending on how much strength is drained from the target based on your lores, again helps to fill a gap that boosts the ranger AS up to not a particularly high level, but a better level than where it was.
What really excites me are all the boosted casting strength.
Yeah, I think that maybe the bolt path isn't really there yet, as Mestys was saying, but the CS path with Camouflage and with 603 and 609 and 610 and 611 and 625 as well is really doable with these new ranger changes.
And now the next spell on our list is Breeze, which, if I'm remembering this spell, or no, was it Call Wind? Am I thinking D&D? I don't know.
Call Wind is the wizard version. Breeze
okay, but
Breeze,
like, it didn't really do a lot before, right?
No.
It just slowed things down, kind of. It's decent control for a room, but most people didn't do it because it's kind of annoying because it blows things around. And I mean, it's still useful for getting rid of clouds and that when you need to. So I for me personally, I would rarely use it because of the fact that it blows things around, and if you're trying to pick things up like loot and whatever, it's kind of annoying to use. So we got rid of that part by default. So people shouldn't be discouraged from using it now if they want to preserve their loot on the ground for whatever reason. It's still there if you need it. If you want to evoke it, you can still blow things around if you want to cause a ruckus. But by default, you can just use it for what it's intended to do, which is control the room and blow away clouds.
But it's also got some combat implications now too, right?
That's right. So you can. It's also a buff spell now, so it allows you to both inflict round time on your targets, and also increases the speed of range-based attacks. Because we did want to establish rangers as kind of like a preeminent force when it comes to ranged combat, and we're still kind of working on that path. But this was one of the steps that we wanted to take.
Cool. Imbue 614. I literally have never in the years I've played Gemstone bothered to learn what imbuing means. So
Oh,
I need
it's
someone.
a really good spell.
I need someone to fill me in here. This will be my beseech moment, but for Rangers.
Even if you don't know about it, I guarantee you've benefited from it at some point.
Yeah. So I mean, Imbue is a spell that allows a ranger with enough blessings, well, with enough, actually it's summoning lore at the moment, and enough SMC ranks to take a stick that's been forged and turn it into a wand or a rod, which can then be embedded by a wizard. And this is the number one way you get a high charge, high mana capacity rod for use with 420, for the use with the spell embed. You can also make amulets and anklets and bracelets and so forth out of wiregrass. But the new ability, maybe we'll just turn over to Mestys, but the new ability is actually really nice for the casting path here.
Go ahead if you'd like to talk about it.
Oh, well, sure. So one of the primary problems for lower level casters is that they run out of mana. Now, the mana changes that came out several months ago certainly make a huge difference here, but it's still a problem. I've run up several wizards. I got one up to 15 mil. I capped another one, yada yada. But for wizards and for people who use spells as their major attack, mana is always a problem. What this spell does is, at 5 blessing lore ranks now, a ranger can forge up a stick and then imbue it, and it will fully charge it. I'm actually not sure what the charge cap is. Maybe Mestys can talk about that in a second. But it will fully charge it up with Wild Entropy, which gives the ranger a very easy way, with a little bit of foresight, to store attack spells. So you could stick, 10, 20 of these rods that you made yourself for, a bit of a front-loaded mana cost and some prep, and never run out of spells charges on a hunt, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's what we wanted to encourage for the lower level spellcasting path. Just having these wands and rods as backup for your attack spell. Just being able to create those and be self-sufficient with them, and not have to seek out another class just to have your spells ready.
I also just really like the image in my head of like this deranged hermit running around with a bunch of magical sticks, like waving them at things and killing them. That's I want someone to really lean into the like wild, long-bearded forest man thing for a druid. Spikethorn, still Spikethorns, but it's now SMR v2.
That's right. On the standard maneuver system, we wanted to it wanted to basically be updated to modern mechanics, but still be pretty potent, and it is generally intended to be kind of maintaining the current performance of the spell, but having it on the maneuver system allows it to be interacting with other systems, like with sounds, and having it as the nature of damage, as it always has been since we introduced nature damage, allows it to interact with 603 wild entropy. So again, that gets amped up. So it's still the old Spikethorn that you love and like to use whenever in a pinch, but also has those increased benefits.
I think I would be remiss if I didn't bring this question up. So I've tried the spell out in depth on the test server, and to be honest, I'm rocking 162 ranger ranks, and I actually don't see much of a difference between the new version of Spikethorn and the old version of Spikethorn. Usually takes me about 2 Spikethorns, maybe 3, to kill an Ithzo champion, standard level 105 at level 100. And on the old system, ranger ranks and level were huge in terms of the impact, the effectiveness of the spell. So I haven't seen, anecdotally, personally, a huge difference between these two versions, but there is a lot of chatter about people concerned. Oh my God, Spike Thorn is being nerfed. Spike Thorn is being changed over to a less effective version of itself. Can I still spike things? And Mestys, would you mind commenting on that?
Sure. I mean, like I mentioned, we wanted to maintain its current performance, and I've run the numbers on the spell. Like I've literally, we have some tools on the back end to kind of simulate combat, and in general, the lethality of it has not significantly been changed from what's on Prime. That is, of course, with the most recent revision that's on test now, which was earlier this week. So I would encourage people who are concerned with the performance to definitely give it another go on the test server, see if we can how it performs to your expectations, and obviously, and always just providing feedback with the results therein.
Thank you.
Mass Calm. That's another spell I've never cast in my life. I assume that's like a sanctuary type of situation, but I don't actually know.
Sort of.
Not quite. It's definitely useful in a pinch, like especially if you're dealing with unexpected swarms, like with bandits.
Yeah.
It is got a very high success rate at calming things in the room. And the only major things that have been updated with it are skipping over targets that were already calmed, and also with the new AoE spell effects limitations put in place. It was also affected by that. So by default, it will be, I think, limited based on. It's no longer unlimited targets. It's always been player friendly, but it will also still affect, I think, up to 6 or 8 targets. I'd have to double check the numbers on that.
And I think it's mana control ranks that modify the targets on the new AoE spells. Is that right, Mestys?
Right, that's right. Yes. So with mana control, you can up that the base targets.
It caps out at like 14 or something. I think I did the numbers a little while ago. Can't remember at the moment though. This is another change. I mean, Rangers have had it good for a long time with Mass Calm and with Nature's Fury with 635 in terms of the number of targets you can hit with it. And I don't know when these AoE changes are going into effect or if they're coming in with the spell changes here, but that is going to be something that is a little different than the way it is now.
Now, we're getting into some of the, well, to me, they seem like bigger changes. I don't know actually if they are or not, or if it's just because they're more iconic spells that I feel that way. But some of these next ones are very different and are going to have a pretty big impact. So let's talk about Resist Nature, or 620.
Sure. So right now, the spell can hit some very high resistance numbers for the energy types that it affects. And we wanted to create we wanted to address a couple things. The high caps. We wanted to be able to create a service-based spell for Rangers, and also a new group buff. So the way that we handled that was to create a permanent version of Resist Nature, which has lower caps of damage resistance, but also it'll last for the lifetime of your item instead of just wearing off after a amount of time. And the group spell also allows more of an ad hoc version of it that allows you to benefit your group just on a day-to-day basis without having to invest that service on your armor itself. And so the service itself is on the new kind of standardized version we've got, which is based on weekly experience absorbed, and allows us to control kind of how much permanent resistance goes out, and the kind of the difficulty of the permanent service is kind of dictated by the properties of the armor, and much of the mechanics of it still are the same as far as acquiring, potions and foraging, kind of playing to the ranger's strengths. but we wanted to address we wanted the service to exist in line with what we have already established with like enchant item and with ensorcel.
If you had just updated it to include lightning, I would have been happy.
Right.
So this is something that I would imagine that a lot of rangers are happy about, because it gives them, like the ensorcel, enchant, monk tattoo version of like being able to provide a service that other people want. Which, like, I had Nuadjha here did fire resistance on the last non-sonic armor that I had, and it lasted forever and it was great. But it felt like more of a niche thing to do. Like, not everybody, well, I don't know, maybe everyone was doing it. But it certainly wasn't moving like ensorcel or enchanting work does.
Right. So that kind of that brings up another one of the concerns we had, which was people only wanted it if it was done by people who were extremely well trained for it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And it was just so situational that Cap, it wasn't as useful as other spell lists, 20th level spell.
Right. Yeah, the problem at Cap is that the one resistance you really want is lightning. You want that for Nelimar, you want that for OTF. For the scatter, you want nature, but mostly you want lightning. And I can speak to this a bit because for years I've sold, like with my Alex's armor, I've sold versions of 620, and it's been a bit of a mixed bag. And I think the changes are, like, overall I think they're amazing, but it is a little bit of a downgrade in some ways, and it's a huge upgrade in other ways. Like once Ascension came out, I don't know how many people are aware of this, but once Ascension came out and you could boost your Blessing Lores training, you could actually get 100% resistance under the current spells design. Now, that doesn't mean that you were immune to things, because you can't reduce a wound past a minor. So you'd still get 1 damage and you still get a minor wound on it, which was effectively about the same as what 95% resistance, which was the previous max after you maxed out your Blessings Lord 150 Blessing Lore ranks. So you had a full set of blessings and enhancers. The new version, making it permanent at a sort of minimum of 20% at tier 5 and stacking to 40% on top of already existing 20% resistance is fantastic. It's not going to be applied as widely as the current version. The current version of the spell does not check for a lot of things that might impact the difficulty of an enchanter or ensorcel. It does check for padding level and such, and you could overcome that with the appropriate training. But I think the new version is going to be a little bit more restrictive. But the ability to add a permanent service to people's items is going to be a huge boon overall for the Ranger class. There, as Mestys was saying, if you couldn't do the highest level of this resistance before, which took all of your Blessings Lord training, by the way, you couldn't do any summon. You had to do 101 Blessings ranks, and you had to get enhancers, which was a pain in the behind. Then yes, you could kind of sell and you could kind of make some ongoing money from it. But this adds a much more useful service that Rangers can provide. That yes, it's a little bit more restrictive in some ways, and it's just a whole heck of a lot better in other ways.
So we have 3 more, right? Well, I guess 3 1/4 more. But Nature's Touch. So I've never leveled a Ranger past 19. So everything after that.
Actually.
These are all new spells as concepts to me.
Yeah, before we move on, can I ask you one question, Mestys, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, as I understand it, when these changes come out, 620 is not currently slated to be released in its new form along with the other changes, and it's not live on the test server yet. Do you have a schedule or an update for what we're thinking about for when that will be released?
I don't have an estimate at this time. Askiro is working on that particular spell. He has the most experience with the kind of the service abilities, since he most recently worked on the monk tattoos. So when he has, I'm sure he can provide an update at some point. But he's working the primary development on this update.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about 625 then.
Sure. Nature's Touch. So previously, this was kind of a required spell for Rangers at a certain point because you needed it to cast indoors, and that still hasn't changed very much. But what the aspects of it that have been updated are the buff to your physical attacks as well as your magical attacks. We wanted this to be kind of the joiner between physical and magical. So it will bestow that maximized version of the wild entropy debuff that we mentioned way back in 603. That increases the potency of your magical attacks, but also when you cast your magical attacks, it also has the ability to potentially modify your next physical attack and have your magical attacks modify your physical attacks by increasing your attack strength. So it's still a staple buff for Rangers, but now it's got these additional interplays that we hope will make your combat more dynamic.
Is there any possibility that it could also make things like forest armor work inside?
Forest armor, I assume, is a script that I do not have control over.
Okay, fair enough.
I think Cinnamon owns it. I have to say, so as Mestys was mentioning or implying a moment ago, Nature's Touch was a necessary but kind of boring and kind of useless spell a lot of the time for Rangers. It added a little bit of Spirit TD and it let you cast Foe and Strength and such inside. Let you have a stronger version of Tangleweed if you cast it inside and so forth. I'm actually really excited about all of these spell changes. I think they massively flesh out Ranger abilities and role-playing and sort of the depth of the spell list. But I have to say that I think that 625 is a beautiful 25th level spell for Rangers now. And I think Rangers who don't want to take the Druid path are going to get actually the most use out of this spell and the self-cast version of 612. Because you don't have to do anything different with 625. You can do exactly what you're already doing. And it encourages you to trade off between magical attacks and physical attacks, which is the heart of what it means to be a semi and to be a ranger in Gemstone. And it adds this nature-based debuff to what you're doing. So, you cast Spike Thorn, you get a boost from 625, you shoot an arrow, that gives you the boost on the arrow, you shoot the arrow gives you a boost back to Spike Thorn. It's just fantastic how this spell creates interplay between physical and magical attacks, and I think it's genius. Really well done, Mestys.
Thank you.
It is interesting to me to think, and I'm just trying to think of the classes that I've played. Like combat is usually, I think UAC is, the most engaging like physical combat system that I've done. But this idea that like there's a reason to do something other than your most powerful, cost efficient thing, like when you're just out hunting, because like because it benefits you to do so and to be more reactive. That is a cool idea.
Yeah, that was one of the things we wanted to address because at a certain point it just becomes Spike Thorn and then go back to Spike Thorn again. And while it still works if you want to do it that way, we wanted to encourage other paths as well.
It's the 1030 effect, like
when a spell becomes its own best setup.
Yeah. So what I would love to hear, just selfishly, I would love to see, I know that people would, well, some bards would lose it. I would love to see 1030 disappear and to have that turned into something else. Just gonna say.
That seems highly unlikely.
We'll have to wait until 2030 for that review.
Right.
Like Cell just like fainted.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure that I might just have to cut that entirely because I'm gonna get like the hate messages from people.
No, just clip it and put it on your Twitter feed. Just that with no context.
Yeah, it's just that. I'll just publish an hour-long episode that's just that claim looped. And then I'll edit it so that it sounds like Mestys is saying, "Yeah, that's coming next week." So, Animal Companion still like the iconic ranger thing to do, right? To go find a natural friend and to bond with it. And that seems mostly the same, except that it looks like it got a little easier to bring your companion around and got some new features.
Yeah. So one of the things that was kind of a shortcoming of Animal Companion is kind of its usefulness in combat, and that's kind of its biggest main mechanical draw. So we wanted to improve that experience by fleshing that out a bit. We mentioned already with Camouflage that it can also affect the companion and give them a boost to their next attack. But we also allowed certain combat abilities to be used while in round time, and also to make the companion's attack and guard happen instantaneously if they haven't already done something like that recently. And just in general, I've worked on the framework of Companion a lot, so I'd like to kind of, it should allow for more tweaking in the future that will hopefully pave the way for some new Ascension abilities, I'll say.
Very cryptic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there were an upgrade path for companions, even if it were unusual, it would be a very interesting addition to the Ranger arsenal.
Yeah, a lot of the code for Companion was very old, and there was a lot of kind of kludge in there that I want to clean up, and definitely started doing that for this update, but laying the foundations, I'll say.
That's an official no comment from Mestys.
Well, we'll look forward to what might come with Animal Companion.
Yeah.
I will say the ability to use the commands in round time is fantastic because, again, Rangers, when in RT or stun, don't really have a good option. And so, again, along with Bark Skin, the ability to tell your companion to attack or to guard while you're in RT is fantastic.
So the only remaining spell then is 650, which I will say, and again, I'm not adding any value to the show, but every time I imagine someone casting Assume Aspect, I picture the cover of the... Do you all remember those Animorphs books?
Animorphs, absolutely.
That's what I picture. I picture like some teenage, everyman looking boy, like profile on a book cover, and then like he's slowly becoming a velociraptor. Like that's what I picture. So that's my lead in to talking about Assume Aspect.
Yeah, that's not wrong. It's built into the feature changes if you talk to them on to the spell.
Yeah. It'll allow you to change your features so you look like that wolf if you'd like.
Yep.
I want to look like the whole transition, though. I want to be an Animorph cover, is what I want.
You want to be able to actually turn into a wolf, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the kind of the hang-ups with Assume Aspect was kind of the upkeep of it. Like, it allows you to do a lot of things very well, but the upkeep of it is having to kind of constantly, every few minutes, assume a new aspect if you want to take the most advantage of the spell. So one of the ways that we approached this was to kind of take away the tedium of it by allowing people to just say, okay, I just want to do this one thing for the entire duration of the spell, rather than having it wear off every so often and then having to switch between aspects or waiting for that cooldown to come back off to go back to the original aspect. So that was our approach to that, but the compromise, of course, is taking the reduced magnitude of that aspect.
And this still interacts with your lore training and with your companion to give you the additional boosts, I assume. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
Okay. Yes. I mean, to add a little bit to the discussion of 650, I mean, ever since this spell has come out, there have been two very distinct camps as to whether they liked it or not. And one camp said, oh my god, this spell lets me do everything, but not for very long. And the other camp said, this is so mana intensive and so limited that I think it's useless, and why the hell is it a 650 spell? Why is it limited to the spell level slot? And this is a really nice compromise between those two camps. You can keep the old version of the spell, or you can do the new version. And one thing I like about this too, as a 50th level spell, with this new evoke ability for the half magnitude full duration, which is 10 minutes for the spell, is that, again, rangers don't have very many, really, there is no persistent like CS booster for a ranger. This actually lets that happen, because you can, as a ranger, you can now assume aspect of Owl, which boosts your wisdom stat, and now suddenly you have, well, it depends on your lore training and your companion and so forth, but now you have a CS boost of maybe 10 points or so, and that's fantastic.
More if you have a bird companion.
Right.
And I mean, most importantly, you can live the dream of being an Animorph kid.
That's correct.
Most importantly.
I am firmly in the camp of thinking that 650 is awesome. I hear the mana concerns. What I try to do is I just try to cast 650 on a node right before, try and time it with the pulse, and I'm at full mana when I run out. Or I'll cast 650 and log out for the night, and then when I log in the next time and I'll be on the hunting ground and I have full man in 650.
That's a big brain ranger move right there.
There are, I mean, what I use 650 for, I use it for two things mainly. Well, three things. So I hunt the Rift. It's a great way to get Spirit back quickly after you get dropped from the Sphere and you've lost Spirit. Boom, you assume the aspect you drop and you've got your full Spirit back basically. But what I usually do is I run a background script to keep Aspect of Porcupine up, which does two things. It boosts your Wall of Thorns defensive ability, so you block more attacks, so they don't hit you. So that's fantastic. But then it also boosts your logic, and so if you're gaining experience, that helps you gain a few extra points per pulse. And so I keep Porcupine up almost constantly in the background when I'm hunting.
Yeah, I definitely turn in a bounty and put up Porcupine when I go rest.
Yep.
And then other than the sort of like big spell list changes, the only other changes are some title changes, right? Like you can officially be a druid or archdruid now.
You can't say not only, because oh my god, I don't. These titles were so hard to get.
Oh, were they? All right, I didn't know. I didn't know.
To get.
Okay.
I swear, like 6 months, several years ago, trying to figure out what the heck the requirements for these titles were, and it was incredibly frustrating. Previously, maybe Mestys can confirm this, but previously you had to not only have enough, I think it was minor spirit ranks, maybe also mana control ranks, and you had the right deity attunement.
It had to be deity. There was a deity requirement. I think mana control and also one of the lores maybe. So it was a lot. It was definitely a lot. We wanted something that was more accessible to rangers, so they have their own special version now. I think the minimum number of ranks is like 40 if you split your lores. So if you have 20 of each, you can get the druid title, and then at I think if you at the minimum 40 of each, you can get archdruid. So something that's attainable, something that's realistic.
Yeah, right. I didn't know that title would mean so much. I should have known.
You had clerics with the title, and you had almost no rangers with it. It
Wow.
was very difficult. I think it was 40 or 50 blessings. I think it was 40 blessings ranks to get druid along with some other stuff, and you had to be attuned to either Kuon or Mayra.
Right, I think that's correct.
Right, and then I think it was 60 minor spirit ranks to get archdruid, which almost no ranger has. Nobody's gonna drop 60 spell ranks into minor spirit unless they're desperate for.
Well, only a true archdruid would be willing to do such a thing,
right?
Yeah.
But this is much better.
Yeah, well, I'm curious to know, just sort of generally, how much you all expect people to take on the archdruid role from a mechanical perspective versus folks sort of stick to how I think most rangers hunt now, which is through, melee or ranged combat. Like, do you think it's going to be an even split, still mostly physical combat oriented folks? Like, what are your expectations for moving forward?
I think the expectation is that there will be an increase in magical combat, but the arms side of it will still be there. The path is open for that pure caster to be there, but I think people will be hesitant to take that on until they have more viable paths via ascension. That's kind of where I'm sitting.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, we're definitely going to have a lot of dabbling early on, just to see. I mean, some people might actually try rangers if they haven't before, which would be cool.
Yeah, I have a level 19 ranger that I've been terrified to permanently, fix stat and then like pick a path. So maybe this will force that.
I think there's going to be a lot of excitement, and I actually think that the druid path over the last anecdotally, I've seen a lot more people over the last few years trying to do a Spikethorn Ranger and trying to do it at crazy early levels. That it's really, really hard to do it. People trying to go Spikethorn as their major attack at level 40, and this is before the mana changes. Incredibly difficult to do that as a Ranger. now you suddenly have the ability to do that, but also to back it up with a low level CS spell like 603, which enhances your Spark Thorn, and is in itself a useful attack spell. So I think it's really doable. I think you'll see a lot more Rangers and double leathers, which give you a 0 spell hindrance. Most Rangers at the higher levels are in Augmented Chain, or I'm in Hauberk. You've got 9 or 11% hindrance there. I think you'll see a little bit less emphasis on the chain class. I think you'll see more emphasis on the doubles, and maybe Brig is a middle point. I kind of hate middle point. Some people like Brig, and I think you'll see a lot of people pursuing the more CS heavy Ranger spells. I'm curious to see what happens with Ascension, like Mestys is hinting at here, and the ways that it can enhance this. Obviously you could boost your CS, you could boost your bolt attack, or so forth through Ascension. But once the profession specific lists open up, there's just a lot of room to play with Rangers.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about Ascension. I do see how Rangers seem to have 3 directions that they could go now, right? With this new list, which is like the caster focused route, the animal focused route, or like the sort of blend of the two, like with the emphasis being more on the physical. So it'll be interesting to see if any of that, or how those ideas come through in the next phase of Ascension.
I think that's really exciting. I will also say that I think that Rangers have always been able to do everything. It's always been a choice. Do you want to do UAC? Do you want to do blunts? Do you want to do 200 weapons? Do you want to do, if you're insane, you could do spell aim previously at 1x, and it was terrible, but you could throw firebolt at things if you really wanted to. You've always been able to make those choices, and I fix skill fairly frequently to try out new things. And at one point I had most of the weapon skills. I was switching back and forth between ranged and OHE and TWC and so forth, just because it was fun, because you could switch things up. And just Rangers have had all these options for a long time. At lower levels you got to make more choices, but Rangers have always been able to sort of do everything. It's one of the things of the class, and this just further enhances that ability to be able to choose a path and to pursue it, and to sort of keep a central theme, but really be able to take it in your own direction.
I want to hear, for Rouste and Nuadjha as players, what your sort of grade, if you had to give one to the Ranger spell review, what would you give it? I also pulled up on the Daily Alanthian, which is brought to you by Soren's Map Shop from May of 2005. The old headlines of Mayhem Mestys updating all of these like Animal Companion and Wall of Thorns and all of these old spells. It's just kind of fun to look at these posts from 15 years ago about the changes that are being changed now.
It's been a journey for sure.
Yeah. So Rouste and Nuadjha, how would you evaluate this if you had to give it a letter grade? Also, as part of that, like, what are you most excited about here?
I think it's amazing. I'd give it an A- until 620 in its new form comes out as well, and then I give it an A. The changes in the spell list, going back to my previous comment, make playing a Ranger a very synthetic experience, merging the physical and the magical sides together, and doing it for the most part without a ton of thought on the Ranger's part, especially with 625. The spells do a really good job, especially with the enhancement of nature damage as a thing, which actually makes 620 even more useful once that's finally released. But it does a really good job of creating a theme and following through on it, and creating these sort of surprising and intriguing interactions between the different spells and the different attacks that a Ranger is capable of. So I think it's fantastic. I also think it's done a great job of bringing in long-standing requests from like the official Ranger boards for instance, turning 609 Sunburst into a direct damage fire spell, which has happened here, to adding lightning to 620 in its new form, which is fantastic. And to doing some things that Rangers have just asked for a long time, and then not just answering requests, but just going so far beyond that to sort of reconceive the Ranger spell list as something that is comprehensive and exciting, and just really the keyword is interactive. These spells interact with each other and with your your attack styles in so many different ways that it's a much more comprehensive experience. And I don't think I can really get this across unless you're playing a ranger and you're playing the ranger on the test server right now and you're really just seeing how they interact. I think people are going to be confused at first when this comes out, and then really, really pleased with it once they figure it out.
All right, I have a couple thoughts I'll get to first, and feel free to stitch them in if they're appropriate in other places. I want to say that we have all the new spell updates, but we also had the archery changes just a couple months ago. So really this feels almost like an entirely new class because everything is different now. And so that's pretty exciting. I think it's pretty cool. I hope to see a lot of people asking questions, trying stuff out, because anything that you didn't like about Rangers I don't know if it exists anymore because it's all so different now, which is exciting. The second is that we finally have to actually think about whether we want to train in summoning or blessing. Yes. Before, 95% of the time, you're just going straight summoning. Now I'm looking at it like, oh man, I want some blessing more now, which is great. I like it when I have to make choices and I actually have to figure stuff out. I don't like just going, okay, here's the path.
Right.
And I think that's good. We're going to see more differentiation between Rangers, which is awesome. I think A- is fair, and I give it the minus because I know I'm going to die several times trying to figure out how these new spells work.
It can't be too easy, right? And Mestys, do you have any you're sort of coming out the other side here, having finished, I guess, the work of putting this together and brainstorming with the team and everything. How would you evaluate sort of your work on this? Score yourself.
Well, I'd say in a couple of ways, it's kind of returning to where things started, right? Like this is where I started as a GM, was kind of a big, extensive Ranger update. And also, again, with the theme of coming at this project from the direction of ascension, and going back to that concept, thinking about how things move on from here. I think in that regard, I'm pretty pleased with how things turned out, and I'm excited for what kind of potential this allows for in the future. So in that regard, I will give it an A.
Man, what a beautiful report card this is going to bring home to the dev team. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say I agree that I think choices just make things better, particularly when those choices are meaningful. And it seems here like there are going to be some really interesting new choices for players to make. And then I liked the word that you used, Nuadjha, when you said that it felt synthetic to you. Like this idea that all these things are sort of working together to create this harmonious whole, which itself, and maybe I'm an English major, I'm probably overreading here, but like is kind of natural and harmonious in feel, right?
I agree.
Yeah, it's like the end of Mass Effect.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going for. Do you all have any other Rangerly thoughts that you want to discuss or bring up here?
Rangers are great. Play a Ranger.
Yeah, definitely play Ranger. Give it a go. It's on a test server right now, and be on the live server at some point in the near future.
Yeah, real soon now. Yeah.
I was just going to say, obviously I think the changes are fantastic overall. I have to say I'm tickled that Mestys took the lead on this previously, 15, 16 years ago as the Ranger guru then, and ushered in those changes. And then not a whole hell of a lot happened
yeah.
for the next 15 years. And I think that's in part because the revisions then were so good.
Mm-hmm.
They filled out spell slots. They combined like 610 and 620. It used to be two different Vine spells, things like that. They worked really well. And now we have this fantastic update that just shocks me at how far beyond player request it goes and how good I think the central vision of it is. And I just love the continuity of Mestys coming back to take care of this here. So thanks, Mestys.
Yeah, playing Ranger is so fun that I've never once scripted my hunting with Rouste. I've done it all by hand the entire time, and it's never gotten old. It's never gotten boring.
The old-fashioned way.
Yep.
Well, so to Rouste and Nuadjha and GM Mestys, thank all three of you for talking with us about this Ranger update. I'm going to have to bust out my little 19 Ranger and start exploring some of these things myself, I guess.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for hosting.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Many thanks to GM Mestys, Nuadjha, and Rouste for coming on the show today to talk Rangers with us. This is the part of the show where I normally mention the Patreon and all that, but I actually want to take a moment to thank everybody who is still listening at this point. 2020 has been a wild year for everybody, I know, global pandemic and all that, and it's been really helpful for me recently to try to reframe things that are challenging or exhausting or infuriating or scary, to recognize how lucky that I am. And I am pretty lucky. So I'm grateful to you right now for listening and for just playing this weird little game that we all love and sending me occasional whispers of encouragement in game or messaging me on Discord or just being part of this world. Those little moments of positivity go a long way, at least for me, in counteracting all of the ugly in the world right now. So what I'm trying to say is that while we are not out of the woods yet, I am hopeful that things will get better soon, and I am grateful to you for being a part of this community. So I wish you and your family peace and good food and incredibly amazing presents, whatever that means to you, as we head into a new year. Thanks for listening, and catch you next time on Town Square Central. So everybody go harass for a specific day.
Harass.
You heard it from Mestys.
No.
Add him in the Discord, people.